The sunset spread across the San Francisco sky, painting the clouds a blazing orange, mirrored in the shimmering bay beyond. On the top floor of the Fairmont Hotel, one of the West Coast's grandest landmarks, crystal chandeliers glowed warmly above a ballroom, polished to a mirror shine. Tonight, this legendary room would showcase the city's opulence and witness the union of two people, two worlds, into one. A face familiar from Forbes covers, Ethan Walker, stood before a mirror in the groom's suite. His black Armani tuxedo was tailored to perfection, framing his tall build. His sharp blue eyes, the same eyes that made rivals hesitate in boardrooms, now flickered with nerves and happiness. Platinum cufflinks on his wrists gleamed, a gift from his late father, a talisman he wore in every defining moment. He drew a deep breath, his hand trembling slightly as he adjusted his tie. Though he was a man who had signed billion-dollar deals and addressed thousands of shareholders without blinking, this moment, waiting for the woman he loved to step into his life forever, left him flustered like a young man in his 20s. "You ready, Ethan?" The deep voice came from behind. Daniel Brooks, his Harvard friend and co-founder, stepped closer. He straightened Ethan's bow tie, his hands trembling, his eyes carrying an unspoken weight. Ethan chuckled softly. "Daniel, I've been ready since the first day I met her at Stanford. Remember that day?" She stood in the law lecture hall and demolished a group of guys with just 3 rebuttals. "I knew right then this was the woman I wanted to spend my life with." Daniel forced a smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Maya Johnson does have a way of making men like us feel small." Ethan laughed, but the odd heaviness in Daniel's tone registered. Daniel, the unshakable partner who never flinched, sounded burdened. Ethan dismissed it, assuming it was just the weight of the day, especially after the two had wrestled with their massive BioNova Therapeutics deal only days earlier. Beyond the door, music swelled canon in D. Ethan inhaled once more. Just a few minutes now, and his greatest dream would come true. In the gilded ballroom of the Fairmont, 300 guests, powerful elites, politicians, artists, scholars sat poised, eyes fixed on the white-carpeted aisle. Each table was adorned with white roses and sprigs of silver eucalyptus, their fragrance mingling with solemn elegance. Leading the bridesmaids was Chloe Miller, Maya's best friend since their university days. She glowed in a champagne silk gown, blonde curls falling lightly, her smile bright as camera flashes. White roses trembled in her hands as she walked. The other bridesmaids followed, accomplished women in law, medicine, and art, symbols of the female empowerment Maya had always championed. The guests smiled, yet some noticed the strain in Chloe's blue eyes. None could have imagined that she would ignite the storm of a tragedy within minutes. A 6-year-old flower girl, Lily, Maya's niece in a tiny white dress, carefully scattered petals as if it were the world's gravest duty. Guests chuckled when she stopped midway to wave at her grandparents. That innocent moment softened the invisible tension pressing on the room. And then, the great doors opened. Maya Johnson appeared. Her gown was a classic white lace heirloom, passed down through 3 generations of Johnson women. Pearls glimmered at her collar, the long train trailing like a crescent moon. Jasmine blossoms in her hair exhaled a delicate fragrance, stilling the room. Maya, civil rights lawyer who had argued before the Supreme Court, the woman fearless against injustice and corporate power, now walked trembling with joy, hand in hand with her mother, Dr. Angela Johnson. In her navy dress, Angela's eyes brimmed with tears as she whispered, "Your father is smiling from heaven, Maya." Maya's chest tightened. Every sacrifice, every fight, had led to this. Her gaze met Ethan's. The world vanished. In his eyes, she saw herself the woman who turned morning coffees into treasures, who taught him that wealth was meaningless without a true home. They clasped hands at the floral altar. The pastor's voice filled the hall, deep and solemn. "Marriage is not merely a contract, but a sacred covenant. If anyone knows why these two should not be joined, speak now." Silence stretched. Guests held their breath. Ethan smiled, squeezing Maya's hand, a vow without words. "We made it." And then, "I do." The words rang clear, cold. The room erupted in gasps. All eyes whipped toward the bridesmaids. Chloe Miller, the maid of honor, Maya's dearest friend, was trembling but unyielding. Her bouquet shook violently, her lips pressed tight, her eyes ablaze. The room froze, before whispers and outrage rippled through the crowd. The pastor frowned. "Excuse me, did you just say—" Chloe inhaled sharply, then spoke. "I have a reason to object. Because I am carrying Ethan Walker's child." The world shattered like crystal on marble. Maya's hand fell limp, her eyes wide with horror. Ethan went pale, blood draining from his body. And the 300 elite guests of San Francisco who thought they'd come for a fairy tale wedding realized they were witnessing the opening act of a scandal that would shake America. The final notes of canon in D died away, leaving a taut silence like a snapped string. Every crystal glass on the tables trembled, scattering shivers of light that mirrored faltering hearts. The pastor hadn't yet repeated the question before Chloe Miller's declaration ripped through the solemnity of the ceremony and hurled a sleet storm into the grand ballroom. Maya heard the rush of her own breath, a slight sound, but in her head it tolled like an alarm. Salt touched her tongue, she'd bitten her lip without realizing it. The discipline of a lawyer who'd once argued before 9 justices told her to breathe, analyze, and ask questions. But the woman in the lace wedding dress, the daughter of a single mother, the girl who had dreamed of a warm home, felt the world tilt, the polished floor turning to water beneath her feet. Beside her, Ethan was motionless. His jaw twitched, his gaze lost its anchor. Behind him by half a step, Daniel Brooks clenched the ring box, his knuckles white. Whispers rolled through the hall in waves. What did she? Pregnant? With Ethan? A few phones flashed. The names of tabloid sites became a curse. Page 6, TMZ, Daily Mail. In the third row, a financial reporter from the Silicon Valley Business Journal reflexively raised his camera. The pastor cleared his throat, his voice still steady but heavy with the gathering storm. "Miss Chloe, this is God's house. Please consider your words. If you have something to present, do so with respect." "I'm sorry, Reverend." Chloe turned to face everyone. Her cheeks were flushed with nerves, but her blue eyes burned with a resolve Maya had never seen. "I can't let Maya marry in the dark. I'm pregnant, 6 weeks, and the father is Ethan." The hall exploded. Maya couldn't move, yet the world around her did. Chairs scraped, cutlery clattered to the floor. Little Lily shrieked after being startled. A man blurted, "Oh my God," and sprang up like a witness fleeing a pileup. Dr. Angela Johnson, Maya's mother, shot to her feet, one hand to her chest, eyes flung wide as if her lids had vanished. She did not cry. A woman who had worked night shifts in the ER and weathered courtroom storms with her daughter understood. Tears were the last luxury. Ethan finally spoke. His voice sounded as if it came from outside his body. "No, that is completely impossible." Chloe shut her eyes as if to draw courage. "Then what about that night in Seattle Bionova, the Edgewater Hotel, room 1710? Ethan, you were there, and you know what I mean." Maya turned and caught the tight vein at Daniel's temple. In the fourth row, Rebecca Brooks, Daniel's wife, laced her fingers so hard her nails cut skin. Her glance at her husband was a silent blade. Rebecca's sharp silence made the air 10 degrees colder. "Chloe." Maya tried to steady her voice, and it splintered. "You're saying, you and Ethan? When?" "The day he said he was in Boston for a partner meeting," Chloe answered, swallowing. "But he was in Seattle. I have the ultrasound." She tucked her hand into the bouquet and drew out a small white envelope, a gesture as delicate and chilling as pulling back a sheet on a body. "I know this is cruel, but..." I couldn't keep quiet. Ethan strode toward Chloe, not in aggression like a swimmer in a rip current reaching for driftwood. "You're lying," he said, not shouting but barely above a whisper. "You're lying." Chloe opened the envelope. The black and white ultrasound appeared, along with a handwritten appointment slip. After a beat's hesitation, the pastor took the paper to keep the room from dissolving into Market Square bickering. He frowned over the numbers. The ultrasound date, 6 weeks ago. He looked up, sadness behind his glasses. "Are you certain the child is?" "I am," Chloe said. Her voice no longer shook. "We were together that night," he said. "The pressure, and that Maya would understand." "Stop." Maya's voice rose and then collapsed, as if she frightened herself. She turned to Ethan. Say something. And 300 people, VC titans, Broadway stars, local politicians, old classmates focused on a single man in a black tux. Ethan inhaled, shoulders sagging, then straightened like a soldier bracing under a pack. I was in Seattle, he said, each word crisp, as if confessing, for work. The BioNova Therapeutics acquisition. I couldn't disclose it, not even to Maya, because of insider trading risk. He swallowed. I wasn't in Boston. I lied about Boston. A long O rippled across the room. The first half of the truth confirmed, the other half still shadowed. And Chloe? Maya asked, eyes fixed on him. Never, Ethan replied at once. Maya, I swear, I never touched her. Never. Chloe let out a brittle laugh, a sound with no light. What would you call that night, then? A fabrication. Ethan snapped his first flash of anger, not the kind of man's bluster who lies badly. Anger mixed with fear, like a growl from a man herded to a cliff edge. You know we were never alone anywhere. Chloe, why? Someone muttered, call security. Another whispered, don't, it'll be a circus. Maya realized she was still holding her bouquet, the one she'd spent 3 weeks choosing, so its white matched the lace collar, and its fragrance wouldn't drown out her mother's perfume. The waxy petals suddenly weighed like stone. She let go. The bouquet fell to the marble, so soft a sound, yet it rang like a crystal shattering in her heart. Little Lily burst into loud sobs. Doctor, Angela scooped her up, soothing and staring at her daughter, the look of a physician who has delivered the worst news to families, but never imagined she'd see her own child as a patient about to collapse. Daniel set the ring box on the table, stepped forward halfway, and froze. Ethan saw the movement at the edge of his vision, the flinch of a man with something to say who lacked the nerve. A grain of grit scraped down Ethan's chest. What? Since when had Daniel, his bedrock, begun to crack? Rebecca stood. Her silence drew blood. I think, she said, voice level to chill, we need to breathe. And listen to Maya. She turned to the bride. You don't owe anyone a reaction right now. You have the right to pause the ceremony. A minute earlier, Maya didn't think she could stand. But Rebecca's voice, calm, unexaggerated, unjudging, felt like a crutch pressed into her palm. Maya squared her shoulders. She looked at the pastor. May I? He nodded. This is your right, Maya. Maya faced Chloe. Memories rushed: dorm rooms, all-nighters, cheap pizza, hands clasped when both got their dream internships. She stifled a sob. Why, Chloe? Chloe faltered. Maya saw a strange mixture in her blue eyes. Shame, fear, and a resolve hard as stone. Because I believe Maya deserves the truth, she insisted. Because I'm carrying a child who can't be treated like a stain. Whose child? A clear female voice cut in. Margaret Steele, the Chicago philanthropist who had funded dozens of civil rights cases Maya fought, stood in the last row. No one expected her to speak, but when she did, the room stilled as it would before a judge. You say 6 weeks, but I'm curious. Why tuck an envelope into your bouquet? Chloe blinked. Because if I had to speak. No one carries their child like a calling card, Margaret said gently, with no slight to the pregnant, only the sharpness of someone who can smell a lie. Unless she prepared for performance. That's enough, Daniel broke in, voice cracking. Everyone looked at him. He rarely raised his voice, least of all in public. We're turning this sacrament into a street trial. Maya, he turned to her. If you want to stop, I'll take you backstage. Ethan, you. No, Maya said, eyes on Ethan. He has to say it all. Ethan nodded, as if stepping into a lighted booth and accepting every question. He turned to the pastor. I'm sorry for lying about Boston. I should never have lied to Maya about anything. But about the baby, before God, before her mother, before everyone present, I am not the father. He drew breath. Chloe, if you have more than an ultrasound with dates, present it. If not, please leave. Chloe glared. You think I made this up for what? Money? Ethan, you know I don't need. I do, Rebecca said again, soft but sharp. You're facing eviction from your Mission District studio after 3 months unpaid rent. Your cards are maxed. Your fashion shoots aren't making it to print. I know because—" She paused, inhaled. "Because I once got you a gig." Another ripple. Chloe flushed. "I'm not." "Chloe," Dr. Angela said gently, pain mistaking her voice. "You may be mistaken. You may be scared. But lying in God's house is a grave sin. And you're hurting a woman you call a friend." Chloe's fingers tightened on the envelope. Tendons rose under her skin. She lifted her head, as if choosing to barrel down a hill with no brakes. "Fine. Suppose you want the truth. That night. Edgewater." Ethan came to the bar at 10:12 p.m. He ordered a rye Manhattan. He sat in the far right corner facing the bay. He said, "I hate lying to Maya about Boston." She glanced at Ethan. "Do you need more? The terrifying thing is not a lie. It's a lie detailed enough for those who want to believe." Maya's knees softened. How did Chloe know his cocktail? How did she see the view, the Ferris wheel glinting in the distance like a fisheye? Ethan frowned. "That bar is always packed. I usually go with Daniel." "Daniel, you were there that night, right?" He snapped around, throwing a rope toward a ship easing away. Daniel started, then looked down. The moment lasted long enough for Ethan's heart to sink. I came after you. Around midnight." "And before that?" Ethan asked. Daniel didn't answer. He didn't need to. Silence can be the loudest reply. The pastor set the ultrasound beside the open ring box, two platinum bands embracing, reflecting everyone's distorted faces. He'd officiated hundreds of weddings. He'd heard objections in the ritual, but never from someone who stood. He knew what to do if a bride fainted. He had the backup playlists, but he'd never been trained for a storm like this. "Daughter," he said to Maya, "you don't have to solve this today. You may pause the ceremony. Love, if it's true, waits." Those words opened a door to a dark corridor. Maya looked at it, then at Ethan. Memories steadied her. Mornings when he made coffee and folded the paper to the op-ed about a federal decision. How he waited below courthouse steps with a coat for her shoulders. Talks about raising children not to fear being different. But memories couldn't save today. Not when his name was tethered to an unborn child on the lips of her closest friend. "I'm sorry." Maya turned to the pastor. "I can't say I do today." Someone sobbed. Ethan didn't move. His face was a mask. Only his eyes betrayed a storm. "Maya," he whispered low for her alone, "don't let someone else's lie steal us." "Then why lie about Boston?" The question came out not to indict but like a reflex before a fresh wound. "You could have said, 'I'm in Seattle for a major deal.' I can't say yet. I'd be mad," we'd argue. "But I wouldn't be crushed like this." He opened his mouth, closed it. Inside him, a moral and strategy system clicked and sparked years of boxing feelings and facts into compartments. Love refused to fit. He signaled the hotel's security. Two staffers in black approached, polite, firm. "We'll escort guests to the lounge for 15 minutes, one said into his mic. "Dinner updates to follow." The movement began like a heavy train leaving a station. Some hurried. Others tried to look again, as if truth might reveal itself if they stepped closer. Margaret Steele took Dr. Angela's hand, tilting her head. "Let's take the girl out. I'll walk on my own," Maya said. She bent, gathered the now loose bouquet. Petals, bruised, slid off and clung to her lace gloves like livid marks. She laid the bouquet on the table beside the ultrasound, the piece of paper turned blade. Then she slipped off her engagement ring. The diamond caught the light, a shooting star, before she set it down. Metal clicked against stone small, like a judge's final rap. "Maya, don't," Ethan said, hand out as if to catch time. His fingers found air. "I'm not leaving you," Maya said, eyes wet, voice steady. "I'm leaving, this right, until the truth is clear." She turned. Her lace hem trailed a white stroke across the dark floor. Dr. Angela followed a half-step behind, like when she walked her first grader across a busy intersection. Lily, soothed, gripped Grandma's hand. 3 generations left the glittering room, and the scent of roses mingled with overheated phones behind them. Chloe still stood, envelope in hand, eyes dull after her surge of courage drained. As Maya passed, she opened her mouth. "Maya, I'm sorry." Maya paused half a beat. Her lips trembled. "If this is true, you just saved me," she whispered. "If this is a lie, you just killed me." She walked on. Ethan watched her go. Something tore in his chest. He wheeled on Daniel. "You knew the bar. You knew Seattle. You knew everything. Why did you stay quiet?" Daniel swallowed. "We'll talk later." "No," Ethan said, anger finally fixing on the nearest target. "Now." Rebecca touched her husband's arm, light as ribbon. The gesture tied down a rising lid on a pressure cooker. "Not here," she said, "and not in front of cameras." A freelance stringer had captured it all in a corner. The ring lay down, the fallen bouquet, the opened ultrasound. He smiled like a man who'd panned gold. Ethan's warped face gleamed in the phone's glass. "No," Ethan murmured to himself. He waved security to shut doors, to control phones, but it was too late. The information plague had spilled beyond Fairmont's crystal walls into the rough bay of social media. The pastor stood alone at the floral altar, looking at the orphaned bands and the creased ultrasound. He folded his hands and prayed. Not for the right it was broken, for the young people sucked into a whirl, darker than ordinary disappointment. Ethan picked up the ring box and snapped it shut, as if packing a bleeding heart for emergency care. He said to Daniel, "I'm going after Maya." Then he stopped and turned to Chloe. His eyes held no confusion for the first time, only the steel of a CEO sniffing out a plot. "You will have to prove it," he said softly. "And if you're playing a game you don't understand, stop before it eats you." Chloe looked at him and dropped her eyes on the envelope. Her fingers shook. For a moment, the hard edge gave way to a slashing fear, just for a moment. She lifted her chin again. "A child needs a name," she said, "and I won't let mine grow up in a lie." Ethan left. Daniel moved to follow, but Rebecca held him back. "Give him 5 minutes," she said. He nodded, eyes tracking his friend like a man who'd lost the Sunday. The Fairmont corridor was absurdly quiet, a strip of safe ground between two fronts. Maya leaned against the wall, eyes shut. "Doctor." Angela held her daughter's face in both hands, forcing their eyes to meet. "Breathe with me," she whispered. "In through your nose, out through your mouth. Again. That's it." Maya obeyed. Each breath pulled the world back, like a torn cloth being stretched tight again. "Do you want a car?" Dr. Angela asked. "I'll take you home." "Back to Brooklyn, no. Your apartment." She smiled, tiredly. "Pain makes people misplace the address of their hearts." "I want to be alone," Maya said, then changed her mind when she saw Lily. "No, take Lily home. I'm going to walk. Just a little." "You don't have to prove you're strong," Dr. Angela said. "Not to me." Maya nodded thickly. "I know." Ethan appeared at the end of the hall. He strolled, as if afraid to shatter something fragile. "Doctor," Angela shifted to half-shield her daughter by instinct. He stopped 3 steps away, far enough not to crowd, close enough for their eyes to lock. Ethan began, then gripped his own hand. He understood. Any defense here was whitewash slapped on a cracked wall. "I'm not asking you to believe me right now. I'm asking one thing. Don't let others define us." "They already did," Maya said, not angry, not sarcastic, just sad. "In that room, then we take it back," Ethan said quietly. "Not with promises, with truth." A figure drifted up behind him, Margaret Steele. She paused, nodding to Dr. Angela and Maya, and said to Ethan, "I have 3 questions and a hypothesis. If you want to clear this, don't waste time." 12 minutes ago, the first video went up. Ethan nodded. "I'll call counsel." He looked at Maya once more. "I will fight. For you. And for the truth, even if, in the end, you don't choose me." He stepped back, giving them air, and left with Margaret 2 figures heading toward another eye of the storm. "Doctor." Angela pressed her forehead to her daughter's, a gesture from countless fever nights when Maya was small. "You don't have to choose tonight," she murmured. "Just breathe." Maya nodded. In. Out. Inside the ballroom, a brief pause became an orderly evacuation. Security eased out unofficial press. The rest were guided to the lounge, where champagne still sat in silver buckets, but no one wanted to raise a glass. Daniel stood at the window, staring down California Street slope, cable cars crawling by as if in another world. Rebecca came and set a hand on his back. The touch was warm, but not wifely. It was the comfort of a friend, salvaging the best of two people before the rest collapsed. "What did you know and not say?" she asked. No detour. Daniel shut his eyes. "I knew Ethan was in Seattle. I knew the bar. I don't know about that night or the baby." His voice ground like footsteps over rock salt. "I should have forced Ethan to tell Maya the truth about Seattle from the start. You didn't," Rebecca said, gentle and blunt. "And now, the bill comes due." He nodded, hollow-eyed, like a man sun-stunned. Across the room, Chloe sat alone. Those who'd comforted her 30 minutes earlier stood at a distance, now not out of hatred but fear of catching the toxic echo of scandal. She stared at the envelope. For the first time that evening, her hands shook so hard the paper nearly slipped. A text lit her screen. "Well done. Now keep quiet. We'll be in touch. Unknown number." She looked up, biting her lip. Outside the glass, Pacific fog rolled in and veiled the Transamerica spire. The door opened. The pastor entered quietly. "Child, would you like to pray?" he asked. No judgment, just an invitation. Chloe stared at him for a long moment, then nodded like a swimmer in a whirl choosing to stop thrashing to save breath. On the terrace, the bay wind slid over Maya's shoulders, smelling of salt and bar lime. She stood beneath the stone arch, arms crossed not for warmth but to hold herself within the frame so it wouldn't shatter. Dr. Angela called a car. Lily dozed on her grandmother's shoulder, mouth open as if dreaming of a sugar-dusted donut. "I'll go to the apartment," Maya said. "I need a night." "And in the morning?" Dr. Angela asked. "What do you want then?" "I want the truth." Her mother nodded. "Truth likes to be late. It still comes." She kissed her daughter's forehead. "I'm close. One call." The car arrived. Tires hissed across the stone groove. "Doctor." Angela lifted Lily into the back seat, then paused to look Maya over, not to check for stains, but to memorize the moment a girl became a woman facing adult darkness. The door shut. The car pulled away. Maya stood alone under warm lamplight, her hem stirring in the wind. She looked at her ringless hand, startled by how foreign it seemed. Her phone buzzed dozens of messages. She didn't open them. She walked slow steps past columns toward where the city pitches downward, headlights glittering like schools of fish. With each step, she repeated, "Breathe. Truth." Behind her, the Fairmont's revolving door swallowed the noise. Before her, San Francisco opened beautiful and indifferent as a sea god. Maya didn't know that an anonymous message was already queued as she left the wedding lights, summoning her to a meeting to learn the truth tomorrow. And when truth came, it wouldn't just save a love. It would set fire to a dark network wider than the calm bay below. The music stopped completely, leaving behind a suffocating silence. The crystal chandeliers still shimmered, champagne glasses fizzed with tiny bubbles. White roses still perfumed the air, but all had become useless details in a shattered scene. Maya stood frozen in the middle of the hall, her eyes vast and empty, the train of her white wedding gown trailing on the floor like a severed cloud. Ethan turned to stone beside her, clutching the ring box so tightly that veins bulged on his hand, his gaze fixed on the ground as if lifting it would mean witnessing the total collapse. The 300 powerful guests of San Francisco, accustomed to billion-dollar deals and lavish parties, had transformed into a panicked, curious crowd. Chairs scraping harshly against marble floors, whispers swelling, phones raised to capture every moment as though watching a one-of-a-kind tragedy unfold live. At the center of those piercing stares, Chloe Miller collapsed into a chair, both hands cradling her still flat stomach. Her bouquet slipped from her fingers, white rose petals scattering like shards of broken trust. Her face twisted with a strange mixture of fear, despair, and a disturbing gleam belonging to someone with the power to destroy. She said nothing, but her trembling body became its own language. Those around her looked on with pity, contempt, and hungry curiosity. She had become the focus of an invisible courtroom, where every glance was a dagger and every thought a verdict. No one could tell whether she was a victim or an orchestrator. They only saw a woman exposed under the harsh lights and cameras, pitiful yet suspicious, fragile yet frightening. In that tense silence, Maya understood. Her closest friend had torn open the veil of her happiest day, and the sentence of betrayal had already been engraved in that instant. Just as the atmosphere froze solid, the grand doors suddenly opened. 2 hotel security staff entered, carrying a black envelope, which they handed directly to Ethan. Inside was no explanation, no congratulatory note, but a small USB drive, accompanied by a crumpled scrap of paper hastily scrawled in black ink. "If you want the truth, open this now. But be prepared, it may destroy far more than this wedding." Ethan gripped it tightly, veins throbbing, his face rigid as marble. Chloe's head snapped up, her eyes locking onto the USB as though recognizing it as a threat even more terrifying than her own explosive declaration. Daniel stood stunned, his face drained of color, while Rebecca folded her arms in silence, her gaze cutting through every layer of pretense. Maya remained still, tears streaming down her hardened face, unaware that in the very room she had just left behind, a real detonator had been placed into the hands of the man she once trusted most. The dazzling lights of the Fairmont seemed to dim, leaving only an atmosphere thick with tension. Ethan gripped the USB tightly in his hand, the cold bite of the small piece of metal cutting into his skin. A device no larger than a finger carried the weight of an empire, a love, a reputation just shattered under the gaze of hundreds. All the sounds around him, the clack of high heels on marble, the incessant buzz of vibrating phones, the gasping breaths of guests blended into a chaotic symphony he could no longer distinguish. He could only hear one thing clearly, the pounding of his heart, urgent and relentless like the drums of war. He strode quickly out of the grand ballroom, ignoring the probing eyes and frantic whispers that trailed him. Each step on the plush red-carpeted hall felt like dragging a massive invisible stone. Only one question pulsed through his mind. Who had sent the USB, and why at that exact, fateful moment? A side room, usually reserved for small conferences, sat empty on the next floor. Ethan pushed the door open. The room was dim, lit only by the bluish glow of a projector left in standby. He slid the USB into the laptop his assistant had prepared for what should have been his wedding speech, a speech that would never be read. The screen flickered on. A single folder appeared, bluntly labeled in block letters, "Truth." Ethan's hand trembled as he clicked. Inside lay dozens of images, video files, and heavy PDF documents. He opened the first file, and the air seemed sucked out of his lungs. On screen was hotel hallway footage from Seattle 3 months earlier. The grainy video showed a man with his exact height, build, and stride Ethan Ward entering a luxury suite. Minutes later, Chloe Miller appeared, keycard in hand, and walked in with him. The door shut behind them. Ethan's legs nearly gave way. He had never been there with Chloe. He had never entered that suite. He had been in a string of BioNova closed-door meetings under strict security. So why did this footage exist? Who had fabricated such a scene? He flipped through more files. A hotel bill under Ethan Ward's name and signature matches his perfectly. A credit card charge for an extravagant dinner for 2. Printed text messages, filled with suggestive exchanges between Chloe's number and one signed E. Each file struck like a dagger, piercing the one truth he held onto. He had never betrayed Maya. Sweat dripped down his temple. Ethan realized this wasn't some reckless accusation. This was a meticulous conspiracy, evidence planted with surgical precision, every detail designed to trap him. Someone wanted to annihilate him, not just in Maya's eyes, but before the world. The door behind him creaked open, spilling a slice of hallway light across the carpet. Daniel stepped in, his face drawn tight, eyes fixed on the laptop screen. He said nothing at first, then quietly shut the door, leaving them alone in the shadowed room. The glow from the screen lit Daniel's features sharply. Ethan spun around, fury and despair compressed in his stare. Silence pressed between them, heavy as a verdict. Daniel moved closer, his eyes flicking over the USB, then locking on Ethan's face. A flicker of something passed through his expression, guilt, challenge, or both. Ethan noticed his friend's hands trembling faintly. And in that instant, he knew. The betrayal wasn't only from the woman in the champagne dress outside. It was from the men he once called brothers. The small USB wasn't just evidence. It was the key to a labyrinth of treachery, one darker and more dangerous than anything Ethan had ever imagined. The conference room was drenched in the faint blue glow of the laptop screen. Ethan's breathing came heavy, each inhale compressed tight in his chest as though the air resisted him. Across from him stood Daniel, his hands buried deep in his pockets, his eyes fixed on the digital file laid open. The air was so thick and tense that even the dust motes drifting through the light seemed to tremble. Ethan rotated the screen, letting the hotel surveillance footage spill across Daniel's face. Daniel's eyes flinched for the briefest instant, an involuntary twitch that betrayed familiarity with something he should have found foreign. That fleeting reaction, faster than a gust of wind, was enough. Ethan saw it, a hairline fracture in the mask. Daniel swallowed hard. His lips parted as if to speak, then closed again. He turned away, walked to the water station in the corner, and poured himself a glass. The gesture was absurd in the moment, an unnecessary ritual to mask a trembling hand. Water sloshed over the rim, dripping onto the carpet, leaving dark stains that looked disturbingly like blood. Ethan stepped closer, his stare piercing. Daniel's silence was no longer the silence of an ally, but of a man who knew more than he dared reveal. The tension in his body wasn't that of shock, but of someone desperately trying to keep a story from unraveling piece by piece. The laptop remained open. Image after image, forged signatures, hotel bills, printed text messages, all paraded across the screen like irrefutable evidence. But Ethan knew the absolute truth wasn't in the documents. It was in the tremor of Daniel's hand, the eyes that refused to meet his, and the short, uneven breaths that betrayed him. A cold draft whistled through the doorframe, carrying the din of voices from the ballroom outside. Guests still gathered, whispering, while the scandal spread like wildfire beyond containment. Yet inside this room, the blaze was fiercer. It devoured a friendship forged at Harvard, tempered through billion-dollar deals, a brotherhood Ethan once believed unbreakable. Daniel finally set the glass down and turned back. His eyes met Ethan's at last, and in them Ethan saw it all: evasion, regret, and a fear that could no longer hide. Enough to know the mask had fallen, and his closest friend was the first link in a chain of betrayal, coiled tight like a serpent, preparing to crush. The conference room door closed behind Ethan, leaving him with an aftershock that words could hardly capture, like walking out of a battle without blood, but with trust torn to shreds. He stepped into the long, red-carpeted hallway, warm, golden light spilling over his strained face. Each step was heavy, as though he were dragging the corpse of a friendship he once thought unshakable behind him. Daniel's image kept looping in his mind, the slight tremor of his hands, the evasive eyes, the uneven breaths. None of it was the reaction of an innocent man. Ethan knew Daniel was hiding something far greater than what the USB showed. Outside, the wedding had collapsed into a storm. Guests clustered in groups, faces tight with tension mingled with fascination, as if they were watching a spectacle more dramatic than any Broadway play. Phones raised high, messages, emails, and social media posts shot across cyberspace, inflating the scandal into a snowball barreling downhill, bigger, faster, and unstoppable. Maya was gone. People whispered she had left the hotel with her mother, carrying only a small bag. The image stabbed Ethan's heart. The woman he loved, the woman he was moments from calling his wife, had vanished in silence, steeped in despair. Each step she took away was a knife carving through his soul, and he did not know if there would be any chance to stitch that emptiness back together. Across the hall, Chloe still sat slumped in her chair, the lights reflecting on her tear-streaked face. And yet, even in that disheveled state, she didn't appear weak. Her silence was a shell, serving as shield and blade, keeping suspicion alive. Some guests pitied her. Others looked at her with open disdain. To Ethan, her figure was chaos incarnate, a once trusted friend, a dangerous witness, or a pawn moved by unseen hands. Amid the turmoil, Rebecca, Daniel's wife, stood utterly still. Her deep blue gown anchored her in the storm, but her eyes, cold and calculating, made people shiver. She didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't rush away. She watched, as though every event, every action, every detail was just another puzzle piece in a bigger picture, only she was beginning to see, and that alone unsettled Ethan more. He left the crowd behind. The hallway carried him to a smaller room usually reserved for bridal preparations. When he pushed the door open, he was startled to find his mother, Margaret Ward, sitting quietly at the vanity. Her face, usually composed and serene, now shadowed and complex. When their eyes met, Ethan immediately felt the quiet disappointment hidden beneath her gaze. Margaret didn't scold him. She handed him a steaming cup of tea, but the silence between them was heavier than 1,000 reproaches. Ethan sat down, clutching the cup, yet felt no warmth seep into his skin. In that moment, he felt like a lost child, yearning for guidance, but knowing the road ahead left no space for weakness. Margaret placed her hand on the table, gentle but firm. She looked straight into his eyes, as if to pierce through every defense he had built. Ethan understood. She didn't need to ask. Mothers always know, sometimes even before their children do. Her gaze said it clearly. You must face the truth, no matter how cruel. Ethan lowered his head, exhaled, and told her everything about the USB, the videos, the forged papers. When he spoke Daniel's name, his voice cracked, breaking under anger and grief. Margaret listened without interrupting, but her lips pressed tight, the familiar sign of storms gathering inside her. When he finished, she only shook her head, her eyes heavy with sorrow. Son, the most significant fracture isn't in the evidence. It's in the trust already broken. The murmurs from outside still filtered in, but mother and son seemed cut off from the world inside this small room. Ethan realized it wasn't just Maya, Chloe, or Daniel the scandal was tearing even his family apart. His mother, once proud, once confident he would be the family's triumph, now faced the threat of seeing her son's name smeared across every front page. The door burst open. Daniel entered, Rebecca following close behind. Their eyes locked with Ethan's in a dense silence that felt like a courtroom without a judge. Daniel stepped forward, ready to speak, but Rebecca's icy glare cut him off. In her eyes, Ethan saw something far more terrifying than accusation certainty, as though she already knew the truth, waiting only for the moment to expose it. The small room transformed into a battlefield. Ethan stood at the center, heart pounding erratically, facing the man he once called a brother and the sister-in-law whose gaze stripped flesh from bone. Margaret sat still, her sad yet unyielding eyes watching like a silent judge. In that moment, Ethan understood. The USB wasn't just a bundle of forged evidence against him. It was poison seeping into friendships, into family, spreading fractures like cracks in glass, widening from marriage to career, from loyalty to love. And the deepest fracture had just opened, right here among those closest to him. In the cramped room, 4 figures faced one another, a man cornered, a friend with a crumbling mask, a woman holding an unspoken truth, and a mother silently watching. The fracture within the family had begun, and from here, it would either split wide into an abyss or be sealed shut by a truth more painful than any lie. At night, the Fairmont Hotel resembled a giant beast convulsing after a seizure. Outside, golden light still washed over the towering glass windows, but inside, the hallways and ballroom carried the residue of chaos, the ruins of what was meant to be the wedding of the century. Hotel staff quietly swept up scattered roses, gathered broken glass, their movements like crime scene cleaners at an unsolved case. No one spoke of vows or love anymore. Instead, whispers flitted, hurried phone calls buzzed, anxious glances darted. The air was thick and unmoving in a small conference room on the 3rd floor. Ethan stood by the window, staring at San Francisco's blazing lights. From this height, the skyscrapers looked like pillars propping up the heavens. But inside him, everything wobbled. In the glass reflection, he no longer saw the calm face of a powerful CEO, only a man cornered, with shadowed eyes and shoulders bowed beneath invisible weight. Daniel sat hunched in a chair, fingers laced together, eyes refusing to meet anyone's. Behind him, Rebecca stood with arms crossed, her posture straight as an arrow, taut as if ready to strike. Margaret, Ethan's mother, still sat in the vanity chair, her face outwardly serene but her eyes fixed, unblinking, as though she already knew the decisive moment was near. The silence stretched until the ticking of the wall clock became a hammer. Ethan turned, eyes sharp as blades, dull into Daniel. The question left his lips not as inquiry but as indictment. "Why you?" Daniel's lips trembled. His breath quickened, his hands clenched into fists. For a second, Ethan thought he would keep denying, hide once more behind the armor of a Harvard-trained attorney who never lost a case. But the weight of the USB, the stares of Rebecca and Margaret, the weeks of guilt all crushed that facade. Daniel closed his eyes, exhaled a shuddering sigh, and began. His voice was hoarse, each word heavy as stone. He told how, over a year ago, when Ethan's company began negotiations to acquire BioNova, a small pharmaceutical firm, holding patents worth billions, hidden forces moved to sabotage the deal. They didn't just want BioNova kept out of Ethan's grasp, they wanted Ethan himself destroyed, eliminated as a rival. And Daniel, drowning in failed investments and debts, was the perfect prey. They approached him with promises, money, power, escape from ruin. At first, Daniel only leaked scraps, meeting schedules, travel plans, draft agreements. Harmless, he told himself. But then he sank deeper. One step became two, and soon the path back was gone. Ethan listened, jaw tight. Each word was a hammer blow against the bedrock of friendship. Memories resurfaced: late nights spent building their first deal, road trips to pitch investors, drunken toasts where they swore brotherhood. Now, Ethan saw that they were all sold cheaply. Rebecca showed no surprise. She stood like a stone, eyes spearing her husband. Ethan realized she already knew. She must have seen it long ago: the late nights, the secret calls, the dimming honesty in his gaze. Rebecca had waited for this moment, the unmasking. Margaret finally spoke, her voice low, resonant, tolling like a bell. "Daniel, what made you a traitor? Was it debt, weakness before temptation, or was Ethan never truly your brother?" Daniel's body shook. He buried his face in his hands. And then came something Ethan had never seen: tears. "I didn't want this. I never meant to betray him. But once I stepped in, they dragged me the whole way. I was trapped between fear and greed, and I chose wrong." No one answered. His confession didn't ease the air, it deepened the abyss. Ethan's chest ached, crushed. Any hope that this was a misunderstanding had died. His brother-in-arms had sold him out not for ideals, but for filthy bills. Rebecca stepped forward. Her voice was steel, sharp and merciless. "You didn't just betray Ethan. You betrayed me. You betrayed this family. You sold our trust for scraps. Do you think sorry can patch that?" Daniel bowed his head, no words left. Ethan turned back to the window. Outside, the city shone, roared, and spun on its relentless axis. But inside him, a world had collapsed. He knew from this moment on, nothing could ever be whole again. Daniel's confession lit the shadows in the midnight silence, but only to carve deeper fractures. Ethan understood this was only the surface. Behind Daniel were others, hidden hands pulling the strings of the game, and unless he uncovered them, what he lost tonight would only be the beginning. That night, San Francisco lay beneath a heavy fog, swallowing the glow of skyscraper lights and drowning the city in a stage set for tragedy. From the small conference room in the Fairmont Hotel, Ethan stepped into the hallway with a heart even heavier than when he'd entered. Daniel's confession had clarified part of the truth, yet it also planted a more profound dread. Who was the one pulling the strings who had the power and cunning to turn his wedding into a battlefield? His footsteps echoed down the carpeted corridor, hollow in the emptiness, each one sinking him further into a maze of unanswered questions. Then, a phone rang, slicing through his thoughts. He glanced at the screen. An unknown number. For a moment, he hesitated, then answered. A low, gravelly voice crackled across the line. "No name, no pleasantries." "You heard Daniel confess. That was only the surface. If you want the truth, come to the north side of the Bay Bridge. Midnight. Come alone. No security. No police. Or else what you lost today will look like nothing compared to what's coming." The line went dead, leaving only static. Ethan froze, gripping the phone. His pulse hammered, but in his eyes, a spark ignited. The puppeteer had stepped out of the shadows. At midnight, Bay Bridge was eerily deserted. The bay winds knifed cold, making the yellow street lamps flicker as if uncertain. Ethan parked near the meeting point, cut the engine, and stepped out. Only the wind and the slap of waves against steel filled the night. Every sense bristled, waiting. A figure emerged through the mist, tall, gaunt, draped in a grey coat. His stride was slow, deliberate, until he stopped 10 yards away. Half his face caught the lamp's glow. The other half sank in shadow. His voice carried low and calm. "You want to know who slipped that USB into your hand?" Ethan said nothing, eyes fixed, sharp as glass. The stranger gave a thin smile, pulled a brown envelope from his coat, and let it fall to the asphalt. The wind slid it toward Ethan's feet. Inside, contract copies, money trails, and the names of those who took payment to play this game. Daniel was only a pawn. The one moving the pieces. "You know him better than anyone." Ethan bent down and tore open the envelope. Pages spilled out. Anonymous transfers, shell companies, and one name glaring back at him: Marcus Hale, CEO of a pharmaceutical giant, direct rival to the BioNova acquisition. Ethan stiffened. Marcus was once a strategic ally who had invested alongside him in past ventures. But months ago, contact had abruptly broken. Now Ethan saw why. Marcus had orchestrated it all. The stranger took a step closer, his raspy voice cutting through the wind. Marcus used Daniel. He used Chloe. He even used Maya as a pawn. The wedding was only the opening move. You can't imagine how far he'll go to hold power. Consider this a warning. Ethan's grip crushed the envelope. The puzzle snapped together, Daniel leaking intel, Chloe manipulated as bait, Maya scarred, and Ethan framed as the final target. Marcus didn't just want to wreck the BioNova deal. He wanted to obliterate Ethan's reputation, strip him bare. "Who are you?" Ethan demanded. The man paused, silent for several beats, then turned away. His silhouette dissolved into the fog. His final words floated back: "When the masks fall, choose between love and power." Ethan drove home in silence. The city streets, hushed and empty, seemed complicit in keeping secrets. In his pocket, the envelope burned like a time bomb waiting for its trigger. He realized now, this wasn't about family or friends anymore. This was a corporate war, where giants crushed anything in their path. At 2 a.m., he entered his penthouse. Darkness filled the room, broken only by the city's glow through the glass walls. The wilted bridal bouquet lay on the table, a bitter relic of the day before. Ethan sat, spreading the documents across the table. Numbers, signatures, forged trails, all threads weaving a web, and at its center, Marcus Hale. 2 images overlapped in his mind. Maya in her wedding gown, tears streaking her face as she walked away. Marcus, cold and coiled like a serpent, pulling every string. One was love, the other, a mortal enemy. And Ethan knew, to reclaim the first, he had to destroy the second. He stayed there until dawn, the first light bleeding through the skyline. In that light, he understood, he had no choice. The power game had only begun, and Marcus Hale had just made his first move. San Francisco woke under radiant golden sunlight, but the sky was still gray in Ethan's mind. After a sleepless night, he stood before the floor-to-ceiling glass of his penthouse, staring out at the fog curling across the bay. Papers about Marcus Hale lay scattered on the table, fragments of a deadly puzzle. Each number and forged contract proved that Marcus had orchestrated the catastrophe the day before. Yet above all, what haunted Ethan most was the image of Maya walking away, her white wedding dress trailing behind her like a torn cloud. The coffee in his hand had long since gone cold. He sighed and lifted his phone. More than 20 missed calls, all to Maya. No response. Long enough to scroll for screens, his texts had been answered only by silence. He knew she was somewhere, perhaps with her mother, possibly hidden away in some anonymous hotel room, but the distance between them had never felt so vast. Maya sat at her mother's kitchen table in Brooklyn, her eyes ringed with shadows. Evelyn Johnson, the woman who had raised her alone, quietly prepared breakfast. On the table lay the morning paper, headline screaming, "Wedding of the Century turns to tragedy. CEO Ethan Ward entangled in scandal." The photo captured Chloe holding up the sonogram, while Maya's tear-streaked face had already become a symbol of betrayal. Maya couldn't bear to look. She felt judged by the entire city, as if every gaze was a blade. Evelyn set down a plate of toast before her, her voice calm but firm. "Daughter, the truth isn't always what the papers print. You've stood in courtrooms enough to know that." Maya traced the rim of her teacup. "But this is different, Mama. This isn't a case. This is my life. I don't know if I can trust Ethan again." Evelyn sat beside her, taking her hand. "Trust is a choice. But if you walk away without digging to the end, you'll live with the question, what if, for the rest of your life. Can you bear that?" The words cut deep. Maya swallowed hard. She knew her mother was right. She was a lawyer, her life revolved around truth, not just emotion. But her heart had been shattered, and reason alone could not piece it back together. That afternoon, Ethan received an unexpected message. Unknown number. But the words stopped his breath. "Café Luna, 5 p.m. alone." M. He went to the small cafe on the corner they'd once chosen for their first date. When he walked in, his chest tightened. Maya sat by the window, sunlight spilling across her hair in a soft halo. Yet her face was no longer gentle but resolute, severe like a lawyer preparing to cross-examine a witness. "Thank you for coming," Maya said. Her voice was steady, neither warm nor cold. Ethan sat opposite her, holding back the flood of emotion. "I'll always come, no matter where you are." Silence stretched. Maya's dark eyes bored into his, searching every shadow. "Tell me the truth, Ethan. Did you betray me with Chloe?" Ethan shook his head at once, without hesitation. "Never. I swear on everything I have. Chloe fabricated that story. Someone is behind her." Maya's brow furrowed. "Daniel. Yes, but Daniel's only a puppet. The real puppeteer is Marcus Hale. I have the proof." Ethan pulled a copy of the forged contracts from his jacket and slid them across the table. Maya scanned the pages carefully, her expression shifting from suspicion to alarm. "If this is true," she said, voice tightening, "Marcus turned our wedding into a pawn in his power game." Ethan nodded, eyes burning with resolve. "I lost you that day. I lost my reputation, my career. But I'd rather lose everything than lose you forever." For the first time in days, Maya saw not the cold CEO, but the man she had loved, the man who once waited outside court with a coat in winter, who brewed her coffee before dawn. Her heart trembled, though reason whispered for more proof. "Ethan, if you're right, we're not just victims of a scheme. We're facing someone powerful enough to destroy anyone. Marcus won't stop here. Then we fight him. Together." Ethan leaned forward, hand resting lightly on the table. "Not just for our love, for everyone else he's used." Maya stared at that hand for a long time. Memories flooded late nights he'd waited, early mornings of coffee, arguments that ended in laughter. Tears pricked her eyes. At last, she laid her hand over his. "All right, but promise me this. No more secrets, no hidden trips, no contracts kept in the dark. If you want me beside you, let me know everything." Ethan nodded fiercely. "I promise." In that moment, a fracture began to mend. Not wholly strong at once, but enough for them to take the next step together. As they left the cafe, Maya lifted her eyes to the evening sky. She drew a deep breath for the first time in days, and the wind cooled against her skin. Ethan walked at her side, the distance still there, but chosen to be faced together. Somewhere in the city's shadows, Marcus Hale still pulled the strings. But now Ethan and Maya had returned not as two broken souls, but as one front. And they both knew the battles ahead would be far fiercer. At night, San Francisco looked like a giant chessboard, where the pieces of steel, glass, and light stood motionless, yet pulsed with hidden currents of power. From the penthouse balcony, Ethan and Maya gazed at the city, knowing their time to prepare was running out. Marcus Hale, the puppeteer, would not sit idle now that his secrets were unraveling. Ethan placed a thick file on the table, his fingers drumming in tense rhythm. "We have evidence, but not enough to take Marcus to court. He has an army of lawyers and officials at his back. Without a killing blow, we'll be the ones swallowed whole." Maya folded her arms, her eyes sharp as if in a courtroom. "If we want to bring him down, we use his own weapon information. He wrecked our lives with a lie pumped full by the press. We'll return the favor with the truth. But it has to be undeniable." Ethan looked at her, admiration and love rising together. Though her heart was not yet healed, Maya had chosen to stand by him in this fight, and he swore he would never lose her again. The next day, they went to see Victoria Ashworth, the woman who had once exposed a crucial piece of Marcus's criminal network. In her elegant office, lined with legal tomes and gleaming plaques, Victoria sat across from them, her blue eyes cold but razor bright. "You have proof of the money trail. Good. But it's not enough," she said evenly. "Marcus built a labyrinth of shell companies. To bring him down, you need an insider. Someone terrified enough to betray him, but credible enough for a court to believe." Maya glanced at Ethan. They both thought of the same name, Daniel. The friend who had betrayed them, but who had confessed, and now trembled on the brink of destruction. Victoria nodded at their look. "Exactly. If Daniel comes forward and testifies, Marcus will have nowhere to run. But convincing him won't be easy. Marcus will silence him before he can speak." Ethan rose, decisive. "Then we go first." That evening, they found Daniel in a dingy apartment uptown. The once confident man was now a wreck, empty bottles scattered across the floor, eyes red from sleepless nights. When Ethan and Maya entered, he recoiled in panic. "What are you doing here? If Marcus knows I spoke to you, he'll kill me." Maya stepped forward, voice firm yet laced with compassion. "Daniel, Marcus used you. You confessed, which means your conscience is still alive. This is your one chance to make it right for Ethan, me, and yourself." Daniel let out a bitter laugh. "Make it right? You don't understand. Marcus isn't just a businessman. He has political ties, financial reach, and enforcers who can make me disappear overnight. You think talking will keep me alive?" Ethan sat opposite him, gaze sharp. "If you stay silent, you're dead anyway. He has no use for you now. But if you stand with us, at least you'll have protection. The FBI is already involved. This is your choice, Daniel." Silence hung heavy. Daniel's eyes darted between them, torn, until he finally gave a weak nod. "I'll testify, but promise me you'll protect my family." Maya laid a hand on his shoulder. "We promise." The plan was set. Victoria contacted an FBI agent, Walsh, who had tracked Marcus for years but lacked direct proof. They would stage a meeting where Daniel would record Marcus admitting to market manipulation and the staged wedding scandal. Ethan and Maya would serve as bait to draw him out. The day of reckoning, the city's air felt thick. They chose a hotel by the bay, a conference room wired with hidden cameras and recorders. Daniel trembled, but Ethan and Maya's steady presence gave him courage. Right on time, Marcus walked in. His cold smile chilled the room by several degrees, and he was impeccable in a grey suit. He scanned the faces, then fixed on Ethan. "You really dare to challenge me? After everything I've done, you're still standing. I admit you're tougher than I thought." Ethan's eyes didn't waver. "You destroyed my wedding, smeared my name, and made Maya a target. I have nothing left to lose. But you do a whole empire about to crumble." Marcus sneered, then turned on Daniel. "And you, my little puppet, I gave you money and opportunity, and this is how you repay me? By siding with a loser?" Daniel swallowed hard, hands shaking, but spoke. "No, Marcus, I'm siding with the truth." Daniel discreetly pressed the recorder hidden beneath the table as Marcus laughed scornfully. The mini camera in his pen blinked to life. "You think truth will save you?" Marcus loomed closer, voice low and venomous. "Truth is whatever the powerful say it, Island. I staged Chloe's pregnancy. I controlled the media. I bought the officials. And the whole world believed me. That is the truth." Every word slipped cleanly into the recorder. Ethan and Maya locked eyes, their hearts pounding. They had what they needed. But then Marcus froze, suspicion flashing in his gaze. "Wait, you think I'm stupid enough not to check?" He pulled out a signal scanner, sweeping the room. Within seconds, it beeped. He ripped the pen off the table and smashed it. The camera shattered. The air turned to ice. Marcus drew a pistol from inside his jacket, pointing it straight at Daniel. "You've made a fatal mistake." In that breathless instant, the door burst open. Agent Walsh and his FBI team stormed in, weapons raised. "Marcus Hale, you are under arrest for fraud, market manipulation, bribery, and obstruction of federal commerce." Marcus backed away, gun trembling. He glared at Ethan, eyes burning. "This isn't over. I still have pawns out there." Then the cuffs snapped around his wrists. He was dragged away in a storm of shouts and flashing lights. Daniel collapsed into his chair, trembling uncontrollably. Maya clung to Ethan, tears spilling down her cheeks, this time from relief. A week later, the court released the evidence. Marcus Hale was remanded awaiting trial, his empire collapsing like a sandcastle at high tide. Daniel was placed under protection, his sentence reduced for cooperation. Chloe vanished from the city. At a press conference, Ethan stood beside Maya, holding her hand tight. The flashes blazed, but they did not flinch. Ethan declared, "We lost a wedding, but we found the truth. And truth is the only foundation on which a future can stand." Maya smiled, squeezing his hand. In her eyes, there was no longer doubt, only love tempered by fire. That afternoon, Ethan knelt in the sand on the Monterey shore and opened a small box. No audience, roses, or fanfare, only the sea and the wind bore witness. "Maya, this time I don't promise a perfect day. I promise a real life with every fracture and every joy. Will you?" Tears streamed down her cheeks as she nodded. Yes, and in the blaze of sunset, they kissed not the flawless beginning they once imagined, but a truer one. A wedding was destroyed, a conspiracy of power, a love tested. In the end, Ethan and Maya understood that happiness is not born from perfection, but from choosing to stand side by side even when everything else has collapsed.